It's WST Sunday Live, hosted by Hrabchak, Lyss Houde, and Jacob Stoller.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome into another edition of WST Sunday Live. My name is Hrabchak. Today, joined by Lyss Houde, and we've got a very deep dive. I know we have our deep dive series list, but this is a deep dive into the Winnipeg Jets offseason. We're going to attack every angle, look at the Jets free agents, look at their draft capital, look at where the franchise is going into next season, and analyze really every single player that is up for a contract, play some deal or no deal when it comes to projected signings as well. So we're super fired up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here Sunday at 9 a.m. Lyss, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. I am sunburnt from sitting on the opposite end of the rum hut yesterday at the Bomber game all day, right down, a couple rows up from the field where, Bomber game just absolute. Yeah, my left shoulder cooked already, and it's not even June yet. So, rest in peace to me. But I had a great time at the Bomber game yesterday. 27,000 people for a preseason Bomber game was pretty awesome. Okay. And hey, it was some decent football, to be honest with you. I enjoyed watching the game, which I don't always say about preseason CFL. So that was a lot of fun.
You can't say that about preseason in a lot of sports. Like sometimes I know we love the Jets and we love, hockey. Preseason hockey is pretty brutal sometimes too. Like just preseason can get bad.
Just love it though, because I'm just like, it's so funny. I love the way the Jets roll their preseason because a lot of the time it's like, I am so glad that like Ben King is playing out there with like Adam. I'm like, what is going on? Like, why and it's so funny, but like it's not entertainment, it's just lore,
Yes, absolutely. It is. And it results in things like your street party questions where it's like name a random Jet and some guy names a goalie that played in the
David
preseason.
Abisher.
Yeah.
That haunts me at night. I can't believe I didn't know that. And oh my gosh, shout out to Kev. That guy's name is Kev, and he rocks because
Unreal.
What a great pull.
I've never heard of that name.
2011.
Yeah.
I looked up his like hockey DB or whatever, and he like was a legitimate like NHL goalie for like a while. Like he actually is like a player. So just not with the Jets.
Yeah. Preseason football is the worst. Well, shout out to the people that went. 27,000 people, like you said, Lyss. Beautiful Saturday afternoon game, and any day you beat the Riders is a good day.
It's perfect for people like me too, because it's like the lines for the concessions and whatever are not as long. It's not as packed. The weather is beautiful, and look, like my barometer for what good football is not like awesome, right? Like Zach Collaros playing a good chunk of that game, and then Chris Streveler coming in. I was curious to see. I was like, I want to see Chris Streveler throw some bombs. I was complaining to the people I was sitting with about the whole concept of like, the moment you put in Chris Streveler, we know exactly what the play is going to look like. So no one's covering the wide receivers for a long play. Yeah. And so I had a lot of fun yesterday, and I thought it was kind of nice to see a couple of new faces. I was like, oh, that's a nice catch. Oh, that was a nice block. Like, who was that? Right. And I do like that aspect of it, but it was better than I thought. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, when the starters play like a quarter, it's definitely like notable. Like people are taking note of which players are playing, which players are starting, and it's interesting. I know my very little sister went and met Bluey before the game in the tailgate. Bluey was there, Lyss. I don't know did you meet Bluey? Cartoon dog, blue dog?
Oh,
Bluey
no, I didn't meet Bluey. I didn't know that Bluey was a season ticket holder. I didn't know that Bluey was in town. Okay. Yeah.
Bluey was in town, so my sister went and their very little sister went and met Bluey. That's what preseason football is all about, But hey, this is a Winnipeg Jets show, so let's move on to the Winnipeg Jets list. And a very crucial offseason for the club. Let me just set the table, and then we have a lot of topics that we're going to talk about in terms of, which players are walking, if the Winnipeg Jets keep their first round pick, things of that nature. But they do have $26 million in cap space, 26.4. And they have a long list of free agents, starting from Nikolai Ehlers, of course. The other UFAs outside of Nikolai Ehlers are Nikolai Ehlers, Mason Appleton, Brandon Tanev, Rasmus Kupari is an RFA, Hayden Fleury, and then the RFAs, Gabriel Velarde, Dylan Sandberg, Morgan Barron, Rasmus Kupari, Parker Ford, and that's basically the list there. So $26.4 million to sign those players. Lyss, where are you at? The season ended over a week ago now. We're halfway through the conference finals. And if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, we're almost through the conference finals. Where are you at with the season, going into the offseason, and just the importance of it to keep this Winnipeg Jets team together and competing at a high level?
The offseason is so hard, and it's why I'm so glad we do long form content here, because I feel like even when I was coming up with topics to put down on our doc for this episode, everything is so connected and everything is so intertwined. And so you're looking at things like the cap space or whatever, and then you immediately start looking at the external market, the internal culture, all these different things. It's so hard to isolate different components of the offseason. We're going to try today in this show for sure. And I'm sure they'll all connect with one another. But how I'm feeling is that there's definitely more secondary pieces to sign this year. Like in the past, It's been like, okay, Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck are coming up. Those are the big cornerstone pieces or whatever. Or it's like, oh, like Saku Maenalainen is expiring, right? Like I feel like this whole idea of like every single one of these guys in isolation, with the exception of, I would venture to say, just Ehlers and Sandberg, if they walk away, if they get traded because they're an RFA, their rights get traded or whatever, that one player on their own, the Jets will get by. They'll make do. It is what it is. Life goes on. Even I'm putting Gabe Vilardi even in that camp, because that's a guy who, again, if he weren't to sign with the Jets, they'd make something work and get something in return. But there is a lot of those guys. And if all of them were to not pan out, if all of them were to walk, the Jets would be in a world of trouble. And I think they completely understand that. So it's like, even again, you lose all of those UFAs. I know that everyone's been dunking on Mason Appleton and all those sorts of things. You still need to have players play hockey games for your team. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see who they prioritize and what they do, because they need to keep more of those guys than they lose.
Yeah, and the RFAs, like, rightfully so, people are less worried about because they're under team control, and the likelihood that they get traded is it. Like Sandberg and Vilardi are 25 years old. Why would the Winnipeg Jets, competing right now, not keep those players in their prime?
It's non-existent. Yeah, it's not really a threat.
So I think the biggest story to start with, Lyss, is Nikolai Ehlers. Pending UFA. What's your gut call? I mean, it's tough to just boil this down and say, does he resign or not in your eyes? But what's your gut call as we sit here on May 25th as to whether or not Nikolai Ehlers is in a Winnipeg Jets uniform next season? We talked about it all year long, saying, oh, I think he leaves. I think he leaves, or I think he stays. Now that we're through the playoffs happened the way that they did. Nikolai Ehlers came back, was one of the Jets' best forwards in the second round. Where do you sit as kind of a gut sense on whether or not Nikolai Ehlers opening night is in a Winnipeg Jets uniform?
Yeah, I think I might lean towards yes, which I think is probably the most unpopular opinion that exists in the market for sure. I get that.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions and caveats with that though, for sure. And one is that we're going to get into the cap projections. I am looking forward to that. Everyone knows I love to try and crunch the numbers, but the magic number for Nikolai Ehlers, to me, centers around what Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck make. Kyle Connor is going to get a contract extension this summer, if not this fall, and it's going to be more than Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck.
It's going to shatter. It's not just going to be more, by the way. We'll talk about that later. It's going to shatter what Scheifele and
exactly. And that's the type of player that I think you can justify that with. He gets similar usage to Mark Scheifele, if not more, because he kills penalties more than Mark Scheifele does, and they play together at 5-on-5. The cap climate is changing. It's a very different cap environment than when Mark Scheifele signed his long-term contract extension. And also, we talk about this, you can't buy goals. You need goal scorers in the NHL. They come at a premium. Nikolai Ehlers right now, I think a lot of people are flirting with the concept of what his AAV should look like. It's going to be a steep increase from the $6 million that he made in his last contract per year. He can't make more than Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck. It just doesn't make sense. So if there are dollars on the table for him externally that are figures that start with, God forbid, like a 9, if not that high 8 end, it's going to be really, really, really hard for the Winnipeg Jets to compete with that. But if you're going dollar for dollar, I don't think I can fully buy into this narrative that like Nikolai Ehlers is like the Winnipeg Jets don't respect me and they don't trust me and they don't use me enough, whatever. I think Nikolai Ehlers wants to win the Stanley Cup. I think the order of priority for Nikolai Ehlers is winning an Olympic gold medal for the Danish hockey team, winning a Stanley Cup, and then making money. I think this guy is a team guy. I think this guy cares about winning, all these things. And if it's between, $8.5 million for 7 years in Anaheim or Chicago versus, making an 8x8 here, I think he stays. So I think that I'm trying to bring a little bit of that, like, I don't know if it's like an optimistic perspective, because I did have some thoughts on it a lot, like an 8, but optimistic. The Winnipeg Jets will miss Nikolai Ehlers severely, and those types of players don't grow on trees. But again, it's the sort of thing, it's so hard to exist in isolation. If the Winnipeg Jets need to be a competitive hockey team 8 years from now, they shouldn't sign Nikolai Ehlers, in the sense of that contract's not going to look great by the end of it. But if you're willing to sit on all these poor contracts in 2031 because you won 2 Stanley Cups, okay, Nikolai Ehlers is going to fall into that category. But if you need to be a competitive hockey team all the way through, when his legs fall off, the back end of that deal isn't going to look super awesome. And if he can't skate the way that he skates right now at the age of 35, which he probably can't, I don't know how I feel about that. So optimistic in terms of, like, I'm just trying to bring a little bit of a different perspective, but I don't even know if I would want that from the Winnipeg Jets, which is a crazy take. I get that. I'm probably the only person that exists that's like, I think Nikolai Ehlers will sign in Winnipeg, but I don't want him to. That's not actually what my take is, but like, I'm leaning in that camp right now with what I'm saying. But
Jacob and I talked about this. Jacob obviously joins us every single Sunday, not here today, writes for sportsnet.ca, but he kind of shares the same concern list. Like, here's my thing. Nikolai Ehlers signs an 8x8. The only thing that matters anyways is the first 4 years. I don't really care about how it ages, because every deal the Winnipeg Jets sign right now, like the Neil Pionk contract in the last 2 years, is that going to be a stellar steal of a deal? Probably not.
Of course not. But then what happens, Connor, if you have Mark Scheifele on a deal like that, Connor Hellebuyck on a deal like that, Neil Pionk on a deal like that, Nikolai Ehlers on a deal like that?
You're not good.
Are you going to have to relocate the team? Are they going to be so terrible that
okay, they're not going to be so terrible. But
I know, but like, you know what I mean? Where it's like
efficient contracts.
No. And can this team, in the business climate that we talk about and how they operate, can they afford to do that? I don't know. Yeah.
The thing with Nikolai Ehlers, like, I don't know, all season long, I've just kind of had it in my mind that he's leaving, and they kind of kept him as a rental. Like, that's been my take on it. The playoffs, not only for, the outpouring of support we saw from Mark Scheifele and like the culture that we saw, every team says they're a family, but like the Winnipeg Jets actually showed it. And I think that's worth something to a player. Like, I think the culture, the team building aspect, the fact Nikolai Ehlers has been here for so long, I think that will matter to him. But also, and Lyss, on your list of priorities for Nikolai Ehlers, you forgot number 1 is being on the ice when Jordan Binnington blows a lead. No matter if it's Jets, Canada, whatever. He's on the ice making an impact, and Jordan Binnington blows a goal or 2-goal lead with under 2 minutes left.
Couldn't happen to a better guy. Couldn't happen to a better guy.
Canada lost, but like, it's fine. So did Binnington. Nikolai Ehlers. I don't know. I do think that winning does matter to him. I do wonder if there's a kind of a happy medium in terms of, going and signing for $9 million with the Utah Mammoth. And
that's the one I keep bringing up. That's going to be the thing, is like talking about signing elsewhere. And then, but if you can go sign that in Utah.
Right. Like a team that's not Chicago,
no,
and just like completely out of it, and like hasn't even been close to the playoffs in the past couple of years, but a team that's like right there. And you can be the guy that goes in and plays top line minutes, like, I do think there's a little bit of that. Like, if Utah offers him 9 per year or 8.5 per year, and the Jets offer 500,000 per year less, where does how much does Nikolai Ehlers prioritize just like flat out winning over?
Right. And Rat River Rebel brings up Carolina, and like, obviously, like, again, playoffs are so interesting because they can change the narrative of things so easily. I would have said Carolina was at the top of my list for Nikolai Ehlers for quite some time. I think he's such a Carolina Hurricane. I think there's so many ways that they could make that work, especially now that they, we can talk about how and why this happened, but no more Marty Necas or Mikko Rantanen. Like, they're definitely not in the position they wanted to be in. God bless Logan Stankoven, and I'm sure I'm going to find another way to bring him up later in the show, but it's just not the same thing. That's a team that's desperate for some high-end shakeups this offseason when they inevitably get swept again in the conference finals. So that's a team, again, same thing where it's like if there's a higher percentage of or dollars or whatever you want to call it in Carolina, that's also a team that could be competitive for the next foreseeable future and has that to offer comparatively to a Chicago or some of those bleaker looking teams.
Jay Miller here says Nick in mini. Oh man, this would I think this would like Jets Twitter would just combust, and like Nikolai Ehlers in a Minnesota Wild jersey.
That would be
kidding me?
Insane.
Oh my goodness, that would be wild. Pun intended there. But man, that would like going to the biggest rival, or okay, maybe not the biggest rival. That was another great street party reel that you did, Lyss. Who's the Jets' biggest rival? Minnesota is definitely like top 2, top 3.
Especially now that they're like better.
In division, competitive, like they made the playoffs and only getting better if Kaprizov stays there. Like he's a UFA next offseason. He's in the Kyle Connor category where he's going to get paid. So that would be crazy if Nikolai Ehlers went to the Minnesota Wild. But again, this is you texted me this yesterday, Lyss, and I agree with you. Whenever we get to free agency season, you know, people bring up like Mitch Marner. It's like, where do you think Mitch Marner's going?
I don't know.
Like there are so many, like Vegas. I don't know. There's so many teams with cap space that can throw a bag at Mitch Marner, and it's like, which one does he prefer? That's basically it. Which is why I think Mitch Marner is going to Vegas, because Vegas is going to throw him a ton of money, or they're going to make the money work somehow. Playing with Jack Eichel, that's going to be a two-way like monster line.
Stupid. That's so stupid. That is not fair.
And it's going to work. And Vegas is going to do it. And Marner
of course it's going to
work. Go to Vegas. I don't know. I don't have like this team has more cap space so they can offer him more. Like when it comes to free agency, I just kind of shrug my shoulders and say, I don't know. Vegas, maybe with like all the big name free agents.
This is definitely recency bias, but July 1st, what would it have been? 2023. So not the July 1st that just happened, but 2 free agent frenzies ago was like, I think the best free agent frenzy I've ever seen. Like that July 1st of 2023 was so fun. Like, and it was a lot of like short-term deals. That was like the Justin Hall deal and like a couple of really random ones like that. Like that was a wacky day. And like, I feel like every single time I make projections for like the bigger ones, but a lot of them are based on vibes and frankly based on what I see other people saying. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I usually trust your opinion on things. I hadn't thought about that. Go look at their cap situation. Go look at who they have coming off the books. And you're like, oh, they actually desperately do need a second line right winger. Let's go. Right. I'm definitely on board with this. But yeah, it's Mitch Marner is going to be a really, really, really fascinating one. And I also I'd be fascinated to see if he and Nikolai Ehlers impact each other in any way, because obviously we know that one of them is an 8-figure player and one of them is a 7. Like I totally got that, but they also fill a similar need in terms of like you make things work when those free agents are on the table if you have an opportunity to bring them in, and they both play high end. They should and could play high end winger roles for the top end of your lineup, whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I agree. And Doug Throsky here saying Vegas has to make cap space. Vegas is up.
We know they know how to make cap space though.
Vegas, Vegas and Kenny's Waterball is saying the Vegas Golden LTIRs. Like Vegas is the gold standard, another pun intended, of creating cap space, going through loopholes. So
the Jack
I could see Nikolai Ehlers ending up in Vegas.
It was so funny the moment there was smoke around Jack Eichel going to Vegas. Everyone immediately knew that Alex Tuch was going to be involved, because it was like same vibes as like Spencer Knight, Seth Jones, where it's like the AAV was just perfect. Or no, sorry, not Spencer Knight, Seth Jones. It was Matthew Tkachuk, Seth Jones, where it was like you knew that LTIR money was going to like just completely, and it was so funny. So yeah. Never forget. God bless Vegas. If I haven't gone on the record on this show saying this before, I'll say it again. I think more teams need to be like them. I don't hate them for playing the game. I think it's sick, and I think if you can do wacky things to make your team competitive, all the power to you, and I love that they do it.
Florida played the game this year. Matthew Tkachuk came back for game 1 of the playoffs. He was on LTIR. And yes, he was actually hurt. maybe.
No kidding. He still is. That guy sucks, man.
He's been rough. Yeah. Like
insane that we're seeing this version of the Florida Panthers with like 40% of Matthew Tkachuk. Just got to say, but like
they're so good.
Insane.
I want to talk about Florida later because I saw some tweets about how like they're the perfect like playoff team, and I want to dive more into that for sure.
Yeah.
But Lyss, I think it's time for deal or no deal with the Winnipeg Jets free agents. We have evolving hockey contract projections here, and we are going to run down the list. If you're joining us here at 9 a.m. WST Sunday Live, thank you so much for joining us for our offseason preview. If you're in chat, play along with us. We're going to run through every single UFA and RFA and their projected contract, and we're going to discuss, if we're Kevin Cheveldayoff, whether or not we sign that. So, Lyss, let's start. We're talking about Nikolai Ehlers. Let's start with him. Evolving Hockey has his contract projected at 7 years, $8.8 million in AAV. Kevin Cheveldayoff, dressed like Lyss Houde this morning. Do you sign that?
Kevin Cheveldayoff says no deal.
Okay. 8.8 is no.
I'm stuck on the 37.55 figure. I don't think he can make more money than those other two guys. I just don't think he can. And I feel like that's a bit of a lazy take, but because I feel like we've seen that in the past with other teams where people talk about that. They're like, oh, like this player can't make more than that. But like it just, for a guy who gets bottom half of your team 5-on-5 usage among forwards, it doesn't make sense for them. Yep. It just doesn't. And I don't know. I don't know how Mark would feel about that either. Like, I don't know. I'm saying no deal.
Okay. Chad is pretty split on it too. A lot of people saying they'd sign it. A lot of people saying no deal. Yeah, I don't know. AFP Analytics is another one. They had his contract projected at 6 years, $8.1 million. So obviously you get.
I thought it was an 8x8 or something.
No, it's 8.1 for 6 years. But the one we're talking about right now from Evolving Hockey, 7 years, $8.8 million per season. But again, if the Jets can do a 6 year, 8.1 and keep it under that internal cap that people are mentioning in chat, like I'd sign that. As for 8.8, yeah, if they can keep it under 8.5 all day.
The Nikolai Ehlers 8 times 8.49999 is gonna hit like crack.
Yes, absolutely. No. 8.8 by 7, I'd still sign it. I think so. Like I said earlier, the last couple of years of that deal might look sketchy. Connor Hellebuyck is in his prime right now. Mark Scheifele is in his prime right now. You only have a few more years left. This is the price of business to keep a top 6 winger. And the issue I have with having Nikolai Ehlers walk, I'm not going to say letting Nikolai Ehlers walk because he's a UFA. He can just choose to go wherever he wants. So the Jets really have no, sway power if he just wants to go to Anaheim and signs for $9 million a year. But the speed element, the secondary scoring element, like what is the Winnipeg Jets second line without Nikolai Ehlers? Is it like
it was already their middle six was so bleak already?
Like, yeah. And you need some kind of secondary scoring. And people will argue Nikolai Ehlers should be a primary scorer, not a secondary scorer. And that is totally fair. And if you're paying him 8.8 by 7, you're paying him to be a primary scorer. I'd still sign it because the contention window is now. And I don't think there's anyone. It's about also the Winnipeg Jets recognizing their market, like keeping players around, because you're not a player for Mitch Marner. You might have the cap space for it, but like, is Mitch Marner going to sign here?
And this is my putting my HR hat on for a second. Talent retention is always cheaper than talent acquisition. The whole idea of keeping a guy that as good is Mitch Marner a better player than Nikolai Ehlers? 1000%. But like if that's, and again, I think that Winnipeg is like a bottom 4 option that is actually going to be a result for Mitch Marner. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but like, how this player works, what this player's lifestyle is, how, like, all these things about guys that you currently have. Whereas when you bring someone in, you always run the risk that it's not going to work. It's expensive to bring players in. It's expensive to figure out how they fit. So keeping guys, especially if they're good, is always the right thing to do. You don't keep guys who are bad. I get that. But like keeping good players is really important in the NHL.
And if the Winnipeg Jets were like a bubble playoff team, maybe I'd feel different about this and maybe look more into, the aging of the contract and things of that nature. And maybe it's a bad mindset to have. And I see people in chat saying no deal. So they probably disagree with this mindset, but you got to do everything you can to keep this team intact, because this is the window. This past year, they won the President's Trophy and lost in the second round. And these next like 2, maybe 3 years is the best chance you'll have to win a cup in the Connor Hellebuyck contract. So I don't know. I'd sign it. Lyss, you'd say no. Is that what you officially went with? No. Yeah, Chad is pretty split on it as well. So it's good that we are split on it here on WST Sunday Live. Let's go to the next one. Let's move into the RFAs. Your guy, Gabriel Vilardi, 4 years, $7.4 million AAV.
Deal.
Wow. I think it's high. So, okay, for context, another AFP Analytics is another one we looked at. It's 4 years, $6.8 million. So this one has it, considerably higher. 4 years, $7.4 million. Lyss. Deal or no deal?
Deal. I say deal. Okay. For the same reason that I say deal for whatever astronomical amount that Kyle Connor has to eventually make, where it's goals don't grow on trees. We're going to get to Kyle Connor
too. I see people mentioning him in chat. Like we're going to talk about that because that's another huge storyline this offseason.
Oh my God, yeah. But goals don't grow on trees, and if
nice.
And once again, I cannot put more stock into whatever games of Gabe Vilardi coming off of the injury this year in the playoffs. Like I know everyone was disappointed with his performance, myself included. I needed more from that player in order to feel good about what his next contract would look like. But also, it's such a fascinating that feels high, but I also feel like
there's going to be so eligible much sticker shock. Like people online are talking about Sam Bennett getting $10 million a year.
Right.
Like,
100%.
So,
but continue. What like he doesn't have arbitration rights this year, does he? Or does he?
I don't
know. It doesn't really matter, but like, I don't know. I'm fascinated to see. This is such a unique player. Like there are so few guys like Gabe Vilardi in the NHL in terms of what his strengths and weaknesses are. And plus you factor in this whole thing of like, do we know what consecutive seasons of 82 games of Gabe Vilardi looks like? No. No one knows what that looks like. And it's so weird. And so we haven't seen a fully healthy Gabe Vilardi for a lot of his tenure with the Winnipeg Jets, but you can't just spawn players like that out of nowhere. There is no one in the Winnipeg Jets system right now. I don't care how young, how old, whatever, that can do what Gabe Vilardi does. The 4 years, I think, is a nice sweet spot because I think signing him to like an 8 or a 7 or whatever is heavily risky, just considering the things that I just said. But going a little bit higher on the AAV for a shorter prove it deal is a bit dramatic because you don't get a $7 million prove it deal. That's not how those work. But I don't know. I say deal on this one. I say deal.
Okay. I say deal as well. I do see some people mentioning Vilardi's, bound for a 6.5, like Running Man says here. I will say, Evolving Hockey has year by year or how much terms on the deal obviously affects how much the AAV is going to be. For a 2-year deal, they have it at 6.3. So it's because the Jets are going to be buying 2 UFA years. If they go 4, that AAV rises so much more. I could totally see a 2-year 6.4 or $6 million deal for Gabe Vilardi as a bit of a bridge.
But 2 years, doesn't 2 years walk him to UFA?
I don't think so.
Or would it be his last year?
Maybe
I'll pull it up. Keep going.
Yeah. But anyways, I could see, and then once you get into like an 8-year deal, like it goes all the way up to like, we're talking Nikolai Ehlers money for Gabe Vilardi. Once you get up to an 8-year deal, at least the projection, right? We're talking Scheifele and Hellebuyck 8.5 a year. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, a 2-year deal would walk him to. They signed him to 1 2. Oh no. Okay, my bad.
No, okay, because there's a.
I'm not as Puckpedia savvy as I was with Cat Friendly, so I don't always follow as closely.
So it would not walk him to UFA. He would still be an RFA.
It would walk him into the position that like. Morgan Marin or whatever is in right now.
He's an RFA, but next year he's a UFA. That's why the 4 years jumps so much more. You're buying 2 UFA years, caps going up, things of that nature. I could totally see a 2-year deal as well.
The years of team control definitely do impact things for sure.
Yeah. So I'd still sign this, the 7.4 by 4 for Gabe Vilardi. For a lot of the reasons you said, I do wonder about the injury risk. He's been hurt just so often in his career. That is something that you do have to take into account when you're signing a player anything longer than a year or two. But again, he's a top 6 winger. He's in his prime. We've talked to, Dmitry Filipovic about this. He's such a throwback player. He's so dynamic on the power play. I think that's a player that would be very tough to replace. So I'd sign that. I'd sign 7.4 by 4 for Gabriel Vilardi. The next one, Lyss, and maybe I'll go first on this. Dylan Sandberg. We're just going to go straight to the 8-year deal because the projection for Evolving Hockey is 4 years, 4.5 million. Yeah. And I don't see that happening. So we're going to go straight to the 8-year deal. We're going to go straight to the 8-year deal. 8 years, 6.18 million. Sign it.
I sign that 1,000 times and I do a backflip in my front yard.
That immediately becomes like a top 2 contract on the Winnipeg Jets.
That's a good deal. Okay, here's my question to you instead, because yes, we're both team yes on that one. That's a great comment, not just deal but squeal. What is the 8-year AAV that would make you say no?
Anything higher than 7.
Anything higher than 7.
Would you sign 8 by 7 for Sandberg? Would you go that high?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think I would too. Well, okay. That's not saying much. Of course, I would blank check Dylan.
Of course,
Sandberg.
you would.
I'd be a terrible
and the Cole Perfetti first ever 10 by 10 is also going to be signed by me. Whatever.
Dylan Sandberg gets 12 million in AAV. What the heck? No, I would go all the way up to 7, and then after that, whoa.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But okay, the contract in question is 8 by 6.1. You sign that all day for a guy that played the tough matchups. He got the Rantanen line in the Dallas series. He got the Robert Thomas line in the St. Louis series. He got the tough matchups alongside Neil Pionk. Another thing, Neil Pionk signed for another 6 years. That pairing was fantastic this year.
Al Camino makes a good comment about that, where he says extending Pionk first means there's no way he signs for less. I think that's interesting because I still think face value, just the whole concept of the offensive defenseman, the this, the that, whatever. I think he can sign for less than. I don't put it in the same camp as Nikolai Ehlers versus with the 1s and 0s versus Mark Scheifele, where I just don't think he can sign for more. I think Dylan Sandberg could sign for more or less than Neil Pionk personally, but I think it's definitely a benchmark deal in my opinion.
I think he'll be less just because we've been over this as well. GMs pay defensemen for time on ice and points. Dylan Sandberg has the time on ice. He's the tough minutes. He plays great defensively, but he doesn't have the points yet. He doesn't play on the power play. And that's why I think Neil Pionk will ultimately, he signed for $7 million a season. I think that'll be higher than Sandberg's deal that he gets this offseason. But 8 years, 6.1, sign that all day. And like I said, it immediately becomes a top 3 contract in value for the Winnipeg Jets the second the pen hits the paper. And I will say, no matter really what it is, even if it's 4 years, 4.5, if you have Sandberg at 4.5 for this window, 4 years, like I said, the only window that really matters, that is just such an insane value. So I don't know. I think no matter what he signs, as long as it doesn't push 7 million, which I don't see that happening.
Me neither,
bring up Jacob Slavin was up the other year. And again, peak of his powers. If Dylan Sandberg is Jacob Slavin, that is the ultimate ceiling for him. And he got 6 million, 6.1 or something. So I don't see.
Do you
Sandberg
put any stock into the term in terms of the UFA of it all, where I remember when Cole Perfetti was bridging, I was like, guys, but this is great because now when you sign him inevitably to an 8-year deal, when this is done, you just got 2 more years of control of Cole Perfetti as opposed to signing him long-term now, which is what happens. If they sign an 8-year deal, it's a bit shorter, whatever. If you sign a 4-year deal, do you fear for, someone putting an offer on the table that he can't refuse and not extending with the Winnipeg Jets and hitting the free market before, his prime is up?
Yeah. And Rat River Rebel here saying Sandberg has more offensive talent than he gets credit for. This is for me, if Dylan Samberg develops the offensive side of his game a little bit more, then you have like a Josh Morrissey type contract value. If it's 8x6, and then next year he has like 8 goals and like 20 assists, like that's just an absolute steal. So, yeah, 8x6.1. We both said sign it. And I can't see it getting any higher than that on an 8-year deal. Let's move on, Lyss. These are a lot, those are the key free agents there, the big ticket guys that the Winnipeg Jets need to get back. These ones are more of depth pieces as we move down the lineup here. Let's go back to an unrestricted free agent, Mason Appleton, 29 years old, 4 years, $3.7 million. I think I know where the chat is going to be on this one. I don't sign this. I think I'll start with this one. I think for the minutes Mason Appleton plays and the role that he plays, it's a very, specialized role being alongside Adam Lowry. I think you can get more value out of that, whether that's a Nikita Chibrikov at 23 years old playing on Adam Lowry's hip, or whether that's Adam Lowry being your second line center and Nikolai Ehlers being his winger, and Cole Perfetti, not Nino Niederreiter and another bottom 6 winger. Whether that's Morgan Barron moving back to the wing, I think you can get more value out of that spot. And paying him 3.7 per season, I think is overpaying for Mason Appleton for the role he plays, for the minutes he plays. Do you agree? Do you sign that?
No, I don't sign that. You don't sign that, yeah. And before I was saying, Kyle Connor, Gabe Lardy, those players don't grow on trees. Mm-hmm. Mason Appletons do grow on trees in the NHL, and that's a player that I think you can replace for a much more effective output per dollar. Everything about a hard cap environment is output per dollar, and in terms of output per dollar and also output per dollar per ice time, and Mason Appleton's numbers are just not good enough for that for my opinion. So no, I don't sign that, and I struggle to sign him at all. Even obviously Mason Appleton's not going to make league minimum, but the whole idea of like him making like a 775 or whatever, it's like, okay, but what crutch does that create for the team of just the role that he will continue to play and the ice time he's going to continue to eat up that could be better served elsewhere? I just walk away from the player as a whole personally.
Okay. Yeah, like who said it here? Dark Skater said, "Can't we teach Chibrikov or Parker Ford to do what Mason Appleton does?" This, in a sense, is my take. I think, like, maybe not Parker Ford, but I do think Nikita Chibrikov, as we sit here on May 25th, makes the Winnipeg Jets roster next season. And it's likely, very likely, as a bottom 6 winger. And I think he's a player that could be alongside Adam Lowry on that third line. And another thing is, like, do they acquire a second line center? Who's really the second line center? Is it Adam Lowry again? Because last season, Mason Appleton was your second line right winger. He played more 5-on-5 minutes than Nikolai Ehlers, right? Like, that was the Winnipeg Jets second line for the start of the year and into the playoffs as well, where they matched up against Mikko Rantanen and things like that. So I think you pass on this one. Chat is pretty unanimous on this. Not surprising. And yeah, I follow as well. Verd mentioning I follow. I don't even know why I did not bring him up, but he's a player. You can run Niederreiter, Lowry, I follow. And that is absolutely a capable shutdown third line or second line, like I just said. That if the Winnipeg Jets want to keep up this matchup game with Adam Lowry, Alex Iafallo is a defensive beast, middle 6 winger that can take that spot. And you just signed him to 3.6. And this deal for Appleton is in that same range. So I think you pass on this one. And a lot of people are agreeing with that as well. Let's rapid fire through the rest list because they're the depth players on the Winnipeg Jets. Morgan Barron, 2 years, $2 million, RFA.
This one gets a deal for me. This is the perfect example of don't pay for bottom line roles. Don't pay old guys who might be bad over young guys who might, or don't pay old guys who are bad over young guys who might be bad. Morgan Barron might be bad. Listen, like, I don't know. I wasn't super pleased with him in the playoffs. Over, he might be bad. Who knows? There's definitely much more upside there, much more potential for him to not be bad than, again, if you let him walk and you have to replace it and inevitably sign some other random guy to a league minimum old plug. Don't do that. I take the deal.
I take it too. Whether it's as the fourth line center, which we saw from Morgan Barron and maybe saw a little bit more from Morgan Barron, or as a winger, again, like I said, on Adam Lowry's wing, if he's stepping up into that role, I like Morgan Barron for what he brings at 2 years, $2 million. So I'd sign that as well. And I think you make some great points. Brandon Tanev, unrestricted free agent, came in at the deadline, 1 year, $1.5 million.
Ooh, one by 1.5. I might sign that. Sign that.
Interesting.
I was keen to walk away from that player. He didn't like a lot of what he brought to the team when they brought him back. But 1.5 million, there are a lot of worse players that you could bring in.
Yeah.
Make even more money than that. So I sit on the fence on that one. I'll do whatever you don't do.
Well, okay. So a 2-year deal for Tanev is 2 years, $2 million, like the same as Morgan Barron. I don't know about a 2-year deal. 1 year, 1.5. I would sign that.
Okay, again, then I won't.
Fourth line.
How dare you? Why would you ever sign that, Connor? You idiot.
Yeah. There we go. This is content, folks. This is content. No, I think I signed that just because he can be a penalty killer. He doesn't have to play every night for 1.5 million. Like, he can be a guy that plays only 60 games and you rotate him in and out. I don't know. It seems pretty inconsequential to the bigger picture. Signing Brandon Tanev to a 1 year, 1.5. So I'd sign it. Fan favorite, or at least I think. I haven't looked at the chat yet, but fan favorite, Brandon Tanev, 1 year, 1.5. Rasmus Kupari, 1 year, $1 million.
Sure.
Again, bottom six. Yeah. Hayden Fleury.
Why not?
This is maybe the last one we'll do. I mean, like, Coughlin is a UFA, Parker Ford's an RFA, Dominic Toninato. These guys are Moose players. Hayden Fleury, though, at his exit interviews, talked about wanting to be a Winnipeg Jet, loving playing in a market where hockey matters. 1 year, $844K. Lyss, I'm going to do my own calculations in this one. Because he loves Winnipeg and because he's bounced around so much in his career, I can see the Winnipeg Jets offering him a 2-year deal. A 2-year deal is $1.1 million. Deal or no deal? 2 year, 1.1 for Hayden Fleury.
This one's hard because we all are thinking about Game 7 versus the St. Louis Blues, where he came out of nowhere and just played really important minutes.
5 minutes.
Had to play so much, played really well, whatever. He wasn't that good this year. The appeal of Hayden Fleury is that he's not Logan Stanley. He was a left-handed defenseman who came in and just looked a little bit cleaner than Logan Stanley because he skates better than Logan Stanley and he's not 6'7", so he's just a little bit less awkward to the eye. Hayden Fleury, take it early. If signing a 2-year Hayden Fleury deal means that he is the 6th left defenseman, non-negotiable on the team, I say no. Don't do that. But if they're okay with, and if there was some two-way potential there or something, because mind you, last fall, everyone thought Hayden Fleury was a Moose. Hayden Fleury was supposed to be a Moose. If there was any two-way potential there, I signed that all day over and over and over yesterday. That's an awesome deal. 2 years, you said 2 years, $1 million.
One or 1.1. Yeah.
I could do it. It's pretty inoffensive cap, and there are worse players that you can sign that money to. But I'm with Vern on this one. I'm on the fence.
On the fence, yep. I'd sign it. Recency bias is absolutely a factor here. I'm not going to act like it's not. I thought even in the Dallas series when he was playing with Luke Schenn at times, or the St. Louis series when he stepped up in Game 7, like you said, I think at the worst, he's a good 8th defenseman or a solid 8th defenseman. That is just depth.
For sure.
And paying him 2 years, $1 million, that's just depth defenseman money.
And also $1 million contracts are going to be the new 775s. They're so cheap.
Right.
So it's such inoffensive money.
I would sign that. Whether or not Hayden Fleury I would have in the lineup opening night alongside Luke Schenn or whatever, starting next season is a different story. But I would absolutely sign that. And he would be an option for that third pair going into next season. So that was deal or no deal. That took a little bit longer than I thought. It's already 9:46. But we just completed the Winnipeg Jets offseason. So if Kevin Cheveldayoff is watching, you're welcome. Those are the deals that you should sign or should not sign this offseason. So Lyss, that was fun, but it's time to get to everyone's favorite segment, trending up or trending down. Now it is the offseason. So how are we going to do this? I don't know. We're going to, go on the fly here and see how this goes. But this is the segment where we pick one player who has trended up or down for the Winnipeg Jets over the past week of play. Over the past week, the Winnipeg Jets have not played. So we'll see how this goes. I mean, Nino Niederreiter's played in the World, so has Nikolai Ehlers. Maybe that'll dominate our trending up. But hey, let's get right into it, Lyss. Trending up or trending down? And hey, if you're here with us live on YouTube, we appreciate it. Make sure you hit the like button and drop your picks down below for trending up, trending down. Maybe I'll pick like a Bombers player or something. Anyways, go ahead. Trending up. Who you got?
For trending up, I'm gonna go with Nino Niederreiter. What a fun little tournament he's had over in Europe there with the in Sweden or wherever they're playing. I don't know where all these games have been, but I love it when guys get to go play for their home countries, especially outside of the traditional four nations, if I may.
If you may.
So I'm gonna give a trending up to Nino Niederreiter because he's been great for Team Switzerland.
Yep. They're in the finals now against USA. So
Correct.
Canada lost to Denmark 2-1, and then Switzerland beat Denmark 7-0. So
what the hell? Sure.
Don't know how that works. But hey, trending down's coming up. So let's just wait on that. Trending up, I'm going to take Nikolai Ehlers. Love the fact that he loves representing his country on the national stage. You can see it when he's playing, when he's scoring goals. He's having an absolute blast. And hey, I was cheering for Canada. We were all cheering for Canada. Nikolai Ehlers beating Jordan Binnington. Oh, well, shrug your shoulders and move on.
Anyway.
Yeah. So I'm going to take Nikolai Ehlers for trending up, playing for Denmark, playing well, and defeating Canada in the quarterfinals. And then they got smoked by your trending up pick, Nino Niederreiter and the Swiss. Trending down, Lyss, who do you got?
Trending down, I'm going to go with I'm going to go with a couple of teams, the big spending teams on July 1st. I am stuck. These teams are trending down for me. The teams that have a lot of cap space that are going to be chomping at the bit to sign Sam Bennett to an $11 million deal.
Oh my goodness.
I think
we could talk about that.
I'm going trending down for just the state of what unrestricted free agency is going to look like on the team level. On the player level, Godspeed to you all. Congratulations on the payday you're about to get that you never would have gotten 3 years ago. But on the team level, I think we're going to see some pretty ugly contracts coming up. I think the Winnipeg Jets are actually, we know that they're not big spenders on July 1st. They don't have the same things to offer for free agency that the Florida Panthers and Tampa Bay Lightning and Dallas Stars do. But I think that's actually going to bode well for the Winnipeg Jets for the next couple of seasons with some of these ugly deals that we're going to see. So trending down, I'm going to go with the cap efficiency of the big spenders that are going to be opening up their wallets in, 35 days here.
Nice. And Doug here saying trending up, Chevy nominated for GM of the Year. We did not mention this, but he did get the nomination for GM of the Year. Maybe, Lyss, we could talk about this after my trending down pick. Who is Jordan Binnington? Always going to take, he's wearing the Canada sweater, but always going to take an opportunity to pick this guy for trending down. Again, Canada outshot Denmark by like double in that game and still lost somehow. And it's, you know what? Let me refine this. It's Jordan Binnington with a lead in the final 2 minutes of a game. That is my trending down pick. We saw it firsthand. Cole Perfetti, 1.6 seconds, and Denmark did it as well. And it wasn't an empty net situation like it was for the first goal. And then it was a 1-1 game and he got scored on. Canada lost with like 30 seconds left. So Jordan Binnington is my trending down pick. Jordan Binnington with a lead with 2 minutes left is my trending down pick for this week. And we'll have to get very creative with that over the course of the offseason because, as we know, the Winnipeg Jets are not playing. But Lyss, let's get right into one burning question. I have a burning question for you, but I'm going to save it for after this read. If you're here with us on YouTube, we really appreciate it. Make sure you've hit the subscribe button as well. Huss and Remo, they're going live every single Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock. You know that already. You're already tuning into that. But hit that subscribe button so that, and the notification bell, so that you get notified every time they go live and we go live at 9 a.m. here on WST Sunday Live. And while you're here with us, drop your questions below. We'll try and rapid fire through them. Big offseason preview. Talk about whatever, anything Jets related we'll try and get to. So drop your questions down below in the chat. And Lyss, my question for you, we held off on it because, it's secondary to maybe the guys that are free agents right now. What is Kyle Connor's AAV on a contract that spans 7 or 8 years that he can sign? He's eligible to sign July 1st.
I think AAV? Kyle Connor is going to sign a deal with an AAV. You can see that I'm kicking this down the road to try and get. I'm so bad at this, but I'm going to go with 9.75.
Wow. That's in my opinion so low. I was going to say 11 million.
11. Okay. 11. So in my head I immediately went 10, but I was like, I just don't know
10
that
10
that like 10 to
is
me
definitely the higher end of it. Yeah.
Like
I don't know.
the whole idea, like to me,
10.
the difference between 9.9 and 10 is significantly more than like the difference between 9.2 and 9.3. Like the whole idea of like jumping into that 10 million figure, I think is a lot. But if anyone is going to be the first 10 million AAV player in, Jets 2.0 here, it makes sense. The shoe fits, I think. I'm going to stick with my 9.75. But yeah, I think, when the random signing at 8 p.m. on a Friday in the middle of August hits that he makes 10.5, I'm not going to be like shocked by it.
Yep. Yeah. Initially, I think 11, just because he's coming off of his best season of his career, 97 points. We did a deep dive on him a few months into the season where we noticed the defensive game. The analytics supported the fact that his defensive game has taken a big leap. And I think a lot of people realized that as well. He had some incredible back checks this year, was a more responsible player defensively, and it didn't take away from his offense. Almost 100 points on the season. Was the Jets' leading scorer in the playoffs, was clutch in the playoffs as well. I could see 11. I could see anywhere from 9.5 to 11 million. Again, 11 is the higher end of it. I think he for sure gets 10. But again, if somehow...
Do you see him making $2.5 million more than Mark Scheifele?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the market. The cap is rising.
It's the market, yeah.
He's a point producer. He's a goal scorer. Yeah, I think he gets 11. I think he gets 11, and I'm gonna stand by that. I feel like it's high, but I'm still gonna stand by it. $11 million is my guess for Kyle Connor. So let's get to one burning question list. I see some questions here in chat. Rat River Rebel asking, what will it take for Adam Lowry to play with offensive wingers? This is an interesting question, and it ties into someone asked if the Winnipeg Jets trade for a 2C. That is something here. Doug saying a true 1B 2C in the offseason. So Lyss, I think that kind of ties into it, because if Adam Lowry is your second line center or it's Vlad Nemestikov, I think that is what it will take. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think there's any chance we see Adam Lowry as, listed actually as the second line center playing with more skilled players next season?
Yeah, I think it really depends. And I think we got a good glimpse of what Scott Arniel wants to do and who Scott Arniel is this year. So I'm inclined to say no, just because, different coaches will do different things. And the whole concept of hard matching is the thing that the Winnipeg Jets, I think, like to do. In game over game, you'll see that the Mikko Rantanen line is against Dylan Sandberg's pairing almost exclusively. It's against Josh Morrissey's pairing almost exclusively. And the whole idea of this is something that we talked about a lot this offseason when we first saw Adam Lowry and Nikolai Ehlers together. And I was like, I want to see Adam Lowry with Cole Perfetti. I want to see it, whatever. And you're like, okay, so what happens then? Does Cole Perfetti play every single game against the Connor McDavids and Nathan McKinnons of the world?
Right.
Or does Vlad Nemestikov and company become the new matchup line, whatever?
Right.
And so I think those two things just kind of combat one another. So I struggle to see a world in which that happens unless you force yourself into a position where you have too many skilled wingers that guys have to. And I would be interested to see that, where it's like, Cole Perfetti has to, and then Brad Lambert plays somewhere else or whatever. And I think that's kind of fun, but I just don't see it. It's not Winnipeg Jets TM hockey, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I will say, like, one thing that I'd like to see more of next season is the Jets get more creative with their line combinations. Yeah. In Game 7 of the St. Louis series, it was the only Game 7 they played. Didn't need to clarify that. Anyways, Connor, Lowry, and Iafallo was the Jets' top line because Scheifele was injured. And the second half of that game, Scott Arniel made an adjustment. Connor, Lowry, Iafallo outshot attempted the Blues like 25-2 and outscored them like 2-0. Obviously, they got the goals late in the game. Lowry scored the OT winner, things of that nature. So I don't know, just more creative, Lowry playing with Kyle Connor and things of that, like it doesn't have to be Connor and Scheifele all the time on the top line, right? Like Jacob Stoller brought this point up on our show many times, like name the most dynamic duos in the NHL. A lot of them spend time apart, like Tkachuk and Barkov, Marner and Matthews, Eichel and Stone. They're not just attached.
McDavid and Draisaitl, they don't really play together.
David and Draisaitl. They're not attached on the same line all the time. So I'd like to see a little bit more creativity there.
I totally agree. And I think that the biggest, the biggest indicator of that happened this season, in my opinion, was when Gabe Vilardi came back from injury, when Iafallo had been playing really well with Connor and Scheifele, and everyone's like, well, what do you do? And I was like, I can't believe that we watched 82 games of never seeing Gabe Vilardi for more than like 3 shifts with the different options. We don't even know what the other options are because we never saw it. And that is not ideal by my eyes.
It's not. I agree. And maybe that is something they'll explore next season. We saw Scardino come in and add some innovations to the lineup, like Kyle Connor penalty killing, which also back to the AAV comment, him being a penalty killer now raises that. But anyways,
12 million now, says Connor.
Yeah, 12 million. No, I'm standing by 11. Anyways, let's move on. Doug asking, does Chevy go get a 2C in the offseason? Like I mentioned earlier, they have 26 million in cap space. They have their first round pick. They have some prospects. Lyss, you don't think it happens?
No, they've been trying to do that for 7 years now. It's not happening. It hasn't happened yet. It's not going to happen now. No.
True. AJ asked, does Heinola finally crack the lineup next season? I'm saying no. I'm sorry, but like
Heinola, get ready to learn a 4-year deal in Liga, buddy.
Liga?
Go home. Finland.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but interesting. Okay. Next question. Do any Moose forwards make the jump to the big club to start next season? Does Salamonson? Interesting question. What do you think, Lyss?
This one's hard. And because I think what I would have said 4 months ago was that Elias Salamonson is the guy. He was one of the last cuts out of training camp last year. And then we heard the comments, whatever. Luke Schenn, I think, interrupts a lot of this. The Winnipeg Jets now have Dylan DeMello, Neil Pionk, and Luke Schenn locked up for next season on the right side.
Yep.
Dylan DeMello not going anywhere. Neil Pionk not going anywhere. Luke Schenn, we know that the team is willing and able to scratch him. He did not play every game that he was able to play, so that, like, it's an option here. But the competition internally just jumped with, and also that ignores the Colin Miller of it all too, who is has another deal in a year.
Another year, 1.5 million. So they have 8 defensemen signed, I believe. Yeah.
Right. So I think
after Sandberg signs, sorry, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And this is like an ongoing thing that like I would, could sit around and slur my words and talk like a freak about for a long time. The whole idea of just like the efficiency of ELCs and the cap efficiency that provides, and getting more young players injected into the lineup, and how desperately the Winnipeg Jets need to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think Elias Salamonson should play a role on the Winnipeg Jets hockey club next year. And I think he could, I think he will, but it's a little bit messier than I think I would have liked for it to have been self-inflicted by the Winnipeg Jets, because the Luke Schenn of it all, like, you didn't need to do that. But besides the point. So Elias Salmonson, I think, is still the most likely. I have questions about Brad Lambert.
The most likely.
Nikita Chibrikov, I guess, could definitely also see,
just because of the climate of the Winnipeg Jets lineup. Like, Salamonson, is he maybe a better or could have a bigger impact? Yes, I think so. Like, starting next season. But the Winnipeg Jets have 8 defensemen signed. So there's a very crowded blue line there. We've seen this many, many times with Ville Heinola, who, again, different scenario almost, but he's waivers exempt. He's going to play on the Moose because there's a crowded blue line. Up front, if players walk, if Mason Appleton doesn't come back, if Brandon Tanev doesn't come back, those are roles that are open for Nikita Chibrikov, who plays a bottom 6 style or a middle 6, bottom 6 style. He can be a good forechecker. He can add some offensive pop, play defensively. And I think
there are just double the slots available, right? You have 6 defensemen, you have 12 forwards. Like, there's just more room there. I think he's the most likely forward by my eyes. I don't
Yeah.
Like some people have been pretty high on Parker Ford for a couple reasons. I don't see Parker Ford being,
maybe as
he also isn't under
forward.
contract. He could go anywhere. So like, that's a bit of a different one. The Brad Lambert of it all, I'm probably going to watch a lot of old Manitoba Moose games again this year just to watch, because Brad Lambert is fascinating. And yeah. Oh, you know that I will, me and my AHL TV subscription, guys, I got this. Don't worry. I'll do it for you. Brad Lambert's a fascinating one. I think, especially if Nikolai Ehlers walks, I still think the Winnipeg Jets need to work some magic to trade for some guys to try and replace something, because Brad Lambert cannot come in and do what Nikolai Ehlers does, but there is a spot in the lineup there that's his for the taking if that's the case, because he has to play with the types of line mates that Nikolai Ehlers also played with. It's just not going to work. He can't play with Brandon Tanev. It just won't happen. So I don't know. And I also just don't see the Winnipeg Jets being the type of team in this contending window to bring in all of Nikita Chibrikov, Brad Lambert, and Elias Salomonsson to play meaningful NHL minutes at the same time. No chance that's happening. So I think Elias Salomonsson probably spends a good chunk of time with the club next year. And I think that Nikita Chibrikov also probably does. Brad Lambert, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, Brad Lambert is a player that needs to have a big summer, and we'll see in training camp. I think that's my answer on him, because could go either way with him. But here's the quote from Kevin Cheveldayoff on Elias Salomonsson. He was asked about him at his exit interviews and said, or end of season availability, said, I think if he has a really good summer, he's someone that could force us to make some big decisions, which is what Cheveldayoff said on Salomonsson. So to me, that reads like if he has a good summer and in camp, he's a player that could make the Winnipeg Jets. Obviously, Kevin Cheveldayoff says this kind of every summer that they're young players. He wants them to have a great summer and make a play in camp, which is absolutely should be the case.
I am uninspired by that quote just based on some of the quotes we've heard directly from Cheveldayoff and Arniel. And of course, I have my Hainala bias, whatever. But like, you say those things about your guys. You say those things about your guys, and you say them. I would say them. Everyone else would say them. You say them. I don't put much stock into it. We'll see what happens at training camp.
Yep. I'm with you on that. I do think, even though, like I said, I think Elias Salomonsson could be a more impact player for the Jets starting next season. I still think Nikita Chibrikov is the player that is in the Winnipeg Jets lineup on opening night, makes the leap from the AHL to the NHL. I think that.
Can I just give a quick Moose? Like, some people in the chat are saying, "Oh, like the Moose were a hard watch this year, whatever." They were. If anyone knows, the Moose were a hard watch this year, but Colby Barlow is going to be playing in the system next year. Braden Yeager is going to be playing in the system next year. And like, there's a couple guys, Kieran Walton could be like, there's a couple, no, Kieran Walton probably won't, but Kieran Walton's too young. I shouldn't say that. Kieran Walton will not be playing for the Moose next year. But like, there's definitely some potential for them to be a little bit more exciting. And I think like Thomas Milic, for example, I think is definitely getting a good confidence boost from the ECHL from this playoff run that he's gone on and everything. So I think, the season ticket holder deposits are open, and nobody's paying me to say this, but guys, Manitoba Moose are a fun hockey team to go watch. Go watch the Manitoba Moose hockey. It's a super affordable way to watch some good hockey, and they're going to have some good players next year. I wouldn't have.
I agree. I'm really looking forward to watching Braden Yeager.
Yeah, Jacob Julian says Tico Napoli.
Julian.
Banger.
There's going to be, like, the Moose always have a few, high-level prospects playing. Even last year when they were a tough watch, it was Chibrikov and Lambert and Salomonsson and Lucius before his career was cut short with EDS there. So I don't know. It's always
Kieran
fun.
Walton won't be eligible to play next year for those asking.
Sorry, say that again.
Kieran Walton can't play next year.
Play. Okay.
No, he's too young.
Okay, too young. But I do think that they're going to be a fun watch next year. Last question here, Lyss, before we wrap up the one burning question. Winnipeg Chaster asks, if Ehlers is signed, is there a chance the Jets trade Velarde as an RFA?
I don't know what these two things, like, are we just talking about like cap dollars? I don't know what these two things have to do with each other.
Would have a winger, a top six, they would sign a top six winger and then presumably move Velarde for like a center, for like a 2C.
I mean, if you could move him for a 2C, like, sure, I don't care, whatever. But like,
you're not the one making the decision, but you are on the show.
I am here. Yeah. Kevin Cheveldayoff has some longer hair today for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a deal on the table, I think the answer is yes. I think Gabe Vilardi is definitely the type of asset that you have to kind of recognize for what it is, which is that if there's a high leverage play you can make with him, I think you do it because of all these question marks that we highlighted earlier in the episode about what this player could possibly do. You don't move him for the sake of moving him. I don't think it's a big enough red flag. That's like there's too much smoke there that you have to get him out before XY. He's not like a ticking time bomb by any means, but like if you can leverage him for like a Braden Yeager for Recker McGroarty trade where it's like kind of like a 1-for-1 deal with like if you could move him for
like Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Right. Okay. So no, not obviously for that specific player, but that concept of a 1-for-1 a Gabe Vilardi for Pierre-Luc Dubois, like if that sort of deal is on the table for a guy like a Pierre-Luc Dubois, of course you look into that 1000% by my eyes.
Sure. Yeah, sorry. I just had to bring that up. Still a great trade for the Jets. Great trade for everyone. Worked out
great trade
really
for everyone, and then Rob Blake got fired, but
yeah, well, yeah. But anyways, that was one burning question. Thank you everyone for submitting your questions. We really appreciate it. And like I said earlier, make sure you hit the like button on the stream, hit that notification bell so you get notified every single time we go live. And Lyss, last thing I want to talk about before we go. What would you rate the likelihood the Winnipeg Jets keep and use their pick at 28 in the first round?
You love that
okay. We'll get into the likelihood of them doing it. My take on it is there's absolutely no way that they can keep that pick and use it. Like I said, the window is right now, 3 years, the next 3 years of the Connor Hellebuyck contract. Even if Gavin McKenna after pick 27 declares, then it's like, okay, you have a player that Gavin McKenna is randomly available at 28. This is obviously a fake scenario, but like if you somehow get an impact player, which is not very likely at 28, the likelihood of them still playing impactful minutes in the next 2 years are very, very low. So I think Kevin Cheveldayoff, I said it on deadline day. I was shocked they kept it. I'll be even more shocked if they keep it through the draft. I think they have to move this for an impact player for right now.
Yeah.
This player they draft won't play for 4 years, 5 years, if that. They're picked 28. Like that's not even a coin flip. That's worse than a coin flip to even make the NHL and make an impact.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this 1,000 times and I'll say it again. The whole concept of moving assets around, bringing in players, moving in picks is that when you want to contend, you want all of your assets to hit maximum value at the same time. And a first round draft pick, nobody is considered, it's a high value asset, but because of what it could turn into, not because it's valuable in the moment. If that player is not playing meaningful NHL games for you, it doesn't matter in your window. I understand the concept of the cost efficiency of entry level contracts. I talked about this earlier in the show, and I'll talk, like, it is super important. This player will be too young to have that kind of an impact. You want to talk about maybe a Braden Yeager, maybe a Colby Barlow, maybe these guys who were drafted in the 2021 to 2023 range. That's a little bit different. This player will not be that in the window. So I 1000% agree with you. And do I have time to go on like a scooch of a tangent here?
It's the offseason.
I'm sure everyone wants it.
We got all summer. We've got all summer. Go ahead.
Listen. I'm going to use the words draft and develop here, and we know where I'm going to go with this. Like the whole concept where people, what the Winnipeg Jets consider themselves to be a draft and develop team. I also consider them to be that in terms of they don't sign the big free agents. We understand that. And also they don't do the whole like New York Rangers of it all, where it's the place where young players go to die in terms of their contract or their career development. We could talk about how the Winnipeg Jets haven't been able to develop an actual second line center. That is a real problem. I completely acknowledge and understand that, but I feel like there's a bit of a misunderstanding about what the whole idea of like draft and develop is. And it's the like Logan Stankoven. And I mentioned this earlier in the show, where draft and develop is exactly what the Dallas Stars do, where Miro Heiskanen was a Dallas Stars draft pick and is now their 1A defenseman, and it's awesome and that's great. But draft and develop is no, Mikko Rantanen was not drafted by your organization, but you were able to bring him in using Logan Stankoven as a centerpiece in that draft,
right?
Like, or in that trade. Like, that's insane. That's a kid that you drafted a little bit later in the NHL and developed him into a legitimate NHL player so that you don't have to trade 4 first-round picks for Mikko Rantanen. And then you can play with those picks a little bit more and you can do something with them. But if the Winnipeg Jets haven't, other than Cole Perfetti, who is a 10th overall draft pick, but in that draft, 5th overall draft caliber. That is a player that fell so ridiculously hard. If the Winnipeg Jets had drafted Jack Quinn instead of Cole Perfetti, if Jack Quinn had fallen to them and that's what they'd taken, we'd be having a different conversation. Cole Perfetti is like a legitimate elite talent. And so this is kind of a Patrick Laine-esque like fell in your lap in that capacity for sure. But like the Winnipeg Jets first round draft picks of late, when they have entered the organization, these players have not turned into ridiculously more highly valued assets than when they first got them. So the Winnipeg Jets, it would be in their best interest based on recent behavior to trade a draft pick before they actually turn it into a player and that player turns into something. Brad Lambert, not currently as valuable as what he could have been, not currently as valuable as a first round draft pick. Colby Barlow, same kind of thing. Braden Yager hasn't been in the organization long enough for me to really know, but we can go back even further than that. Ville Heinola, right? That's the 2019 first round draft pick. These are guys that are less valuable than a current lottery ticket. And I also think I don't know if I love the way NHL teams value first round draft picks. I think they think a little bit too highly of them for sure, but that bodes well for a team that is able to fork them over. I think the Winnipeg Jets don't need to hold on to these draft picks if they're not going to turn them into more valuable assets to trade for pieces in their contention window. That's my rant.
I 100% agree. We've brought this up at the trade deadline too. It's like, if you have a chance to get a player, an impact player, to use a prospect who's a maybe, you do it. Like the Colorado Avalanche traded a first in Cal Ritchie for Brock Nelson, and it did not work out for them. Brock Nelson did not play well enough or play up to his standards in the first round against the Dallas Stars. And they were out in the first round. So you could argue that they overpaid for Brock Nelson. And they're going to be, worse off in the long term because of it. In the offseason, you have more of an opportunity to get a player with term, to trade a 1 and Brad Lambert for a player like Bo Horvat, put a package together for a guy on a 7-year deal to make that 2C role fulfilled for this window, for the Hellebuck Scheifele window. So I 100% agree. Julian was saying earlier that they're more of a draft and over marinate team than a draft and develop. I agree. They look, this 2C thing, we were talking about it with Brian Little. Like, they've had years where they've drafted centers. It hasn't panned out. And it just hasn't really, they haven't drafted and developed a 2-7 or 2C.
Cole Perfetti played next to no wing in his junior career.
Yeah. And now he's a full-time winger. And I just don't see, maybe that's the next level of innovation next year is Cole Perfetti first day of training camps as center, and they try it.
We talked about this though with him and Gabe Vilardi, right? Where it's like, what if, but it's just,
I just can't see it. I don't know.
I don't see it either.
I mean, the lineup might dictate it, but that's maybe a conversation for another time. Once we know, like, if Ehlers is back and they don't trade for a 2C, then it's like, okay, maybe. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting because this team has a lot of prospects that I think their value is perceived higher than it will actually be, which I agree with you on that front list. And they have their first round pick. And again, I'm still shocked that they didn't trade it at the deadline. Prices were very high at the deadline. So a first round, I mean, they traded 2s for Tanev and Shen, right? So I
here's
do think
my quick counter to that. Maybe it's not a bad thing that they didn't trade that for a rental at the deadline, because you probably need to use it realistically to replace Nikolai Ehlers, right? Like, because you're not going to sign Nikolai Ehlers on July 1st, or Mitch Marner or Sam Bennett or whoever, those guys aren't coming here. You need to bring them in here against their will, like they've done with all these other guys who have signed these long-term contracts here, right? Neil Pionk, Alex Iafallo, Nino Niederreiter, Vlad Nemeskov, all guys who are traded here against their own wishes or whatever. Not against they didn't choose to come here. They were told to come here, but they chose to stay. And that's kind of, I think, the lens the Winnipeg Jets have to take here.
And that's an interesting, especially if Nikolai Ehlers walks. Like, my thing with the pick is, like, you need to move it for an impact player, because then you can solve that issue of, like, having the 2C of the future. But if Nikolai Ehlers walks, then there's really no way you can keep that pick. in my opinion. Like, then it goes back to the conversation we had earlier in the show. Like, what's the second line? Who's the secondary scorers on this team? Like, they just wouldn't have enough offensive pop, and they would need to go get offensive pop.
Brad Lambert, also drafted as a center.
Brad Lambert drafted as a center. Still in question whether or not he'll be a center at the NHL level. So, yeah, it's interesting. And I haven't had enough time to dive into, specific names of players that the Winnipeg Jets could target. That's something that we'll keep an eye on this offseason as well. But yeah, let's end it there. Your coffee's done. It's time to wrap up WST Sunday Live.
Stoop raises their mason jar to me, so
there you go.
Always the mason jars.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to say, Lyss, on the way out today for our offseason preview?
No, I mean, I think, listen, I always say this where I'm like, oh my gosh, like this season, I was like, I love this season for all these different reasons. And last season, I loved last season for so many different reasons. I love this offseason already. There's so much that we're going to get to talk about. There's so much to investigate and everything. And God bless Puckpedia, is the user interface of the application is much better than it was. Last offseason was the no cap friendly, but Puckpedia wasn't quite as refined of a platform yet. So shout out to Puckpedia. I will be spending more time on your platform than I will be spending speaking to human people over the course of the next couple of weeks. But I am very much looking forward to, obviously, the end of the NHL playoffs. Hopefully we get some competitive Stanley Cup finals, because we're certainly not seeing it in the East right now. And then we'll have the NHL awards, we'll have the NHL draft, we'll have free agent frenzy, like classic things that happen every year. But these things, other than the playoffs, obviously, all include the Winnipeg Jets more than they often do, where, there are a lot of, if not Winnipeg making free agent signings on July 1st, a lot of their players will be signed elsewhere. And so we'll be talking about that and looking at that. The NHL awards, very Winnipeg Jets intensive right now and this year, which is really interesting. The draft, the Winnipeg Jets still have a first round pick, so they could be drafting on the table on that day. But if not, they'll be in trade talks and doing all these different kinds of things. There's just a lot of Winnipeg Jets content to be had, which is like, God bless, because when there's not a lot of Winnipeg Jets stuff to talk about, I go insane. So I'm looking forward to the next couple months, and I don't want to break from hockey. I never want to break from hockey, so I'm glad that we'll have things to talk about.
Yeah, and we're at 10:20 here on a Sunday, and we didn't even talk about the hockey that's happening right now. I said earlier, I want to talk about Florida because I think they're like the perfect, like they know exactly what playoff hockey is like, and they have like mastered it. And they're just like dominating Carolina right now. And then Edmonton, like I know if you're a Jets 1.0 fan, you don't love Edmonton for a lot of reasons, but I'm cheering for Connor McDavid. And that series has been so much fun. You don't, okay. Again, I'm cheering for Connor McDavid. I know you don't like the Oilers, Lyss, and I know a lot of people in chat don't like the Oilers. It's, but still, it's the lesser of four evils. I mean, I guess Carolina, but they're out. But anyways, we will talk more about the NHL playoffs next week because today was very Winnipeg Jets focused.
I will not be here next week.
Yeah, we won't have a show next weekend. But the weekend after that, we will talk.
We'll talk after that.
So there you go. Anyways.
So no show next week though. So if you guys are here, we won't be doing a show next week. But we will do a show the week after that. And over the off season, we'll see. We'll keep you guys posted on what we're doing. But next week is a no. I can tell you that for sure.
Next week is a no. But over the off season, we'll talk about the Stanley Cup finals. We'll talk about more Winnipeg Jets news. Like you said, Lyss, there's so much to follow this offseason. And I can't wait to break it all down and see what this team looks like going into another year where they're going to be, a playoff team and looking for the Stanley Cup to get over the hump there in the second round and beat a Dallas or a Colorado or whoever comes out of that and try and get that playoff success that has eluded them in the past couple of seasons here. So that's going to do it for us on our Winnipeg Jets offseason preview. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. We really appreciate it. Like Lyss said, no show next week, but the week after that, we will be back and we'll be talking more about the Winnipeg Jets. Hit the like button on the way out, folks. Hit that subscribe and the notification bell so that you don't miss when we do go live, and you won't get notified if we don't go live like next Sunday. But the Sunday after that, you will get notified when we do go live. And we really appreciate appreciate you all joining us. So enjoy your Sunday, everyone. Enjoy the hockey this week. Even if the Eastern Conference Finals are going to end rather abruptly, enjoy the Western Conference Finals, and we'll see you June 7th for our next WST Sunday Live. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you later.